My neighbor dumped a whole bag of fertilizer on her tomatoes last month. 3 weeks later, dead plants and ruined soil. She made the same mistake 89% of gardeners make, and you're probably making at least three of them right now, without knowing it. Hey, garden friend! Welcome back to Serene Green Gardens. If you're new here, this channel is all about growing amazing vegetables without breaking the bank. We keep it simple, practical, and real. Quick favor, hit subscribe and the bell icon. Then drop a comment telling me what vegetable you're growing this season. I read everyone. All right, let's jump in because mistake number 1 is happening in your garden right now. Mistake number 1, feeding your soil like it's a fast food restaurant. Okay, mistake number 1 is what I call the fast food approach. Most gardeners grab that bright blue synthetic fertilizer, dump it on their plants, and expect miracles overnight. But here's what's actually happening. Your soil is a living ecosystem with billions of microorganisms working to break down nutrients. When you use synthetic fertilizer, you're bypassing this entire system. It's like eating fast food every day instead of home-cooked meals. Sure, you get quick results, but long-term, your soil suffers. I learned how to grow kohlrabi. You know that weird alien-looking vegetable? I was dumping synthetic fertilizer on mine every 2 weeks, and they kept turning woody and bitter. Turns out, the chemicals were killing the beneficial bacteria that kohlrabi needs. These bacteria create loose, aerated soil, and without them, my kohlrabi became inedible wooden balls. The fix? Switch to organic fertilizers like compost or well-rotted manure. These feed the microorganisms first, which then feed your plants. It's slower, but way more sustainable. I top-dressed my kohlrabi with 2 inches of compost and added grass clippings as mulch. 3 weeks later, the leaves went from pale to vibrant green. At harvest, they were crisp, sweet, and perfect. The best part? This costs less over time. I make my own compost from kitchen scraps and haven't bought fertilizer in 3 years. My garden has never been healthier. Mistake number 2, ignoring the NPK numbers. Mistake number 2, those 3 numbers on fertilizer bags, the NPK ratio. Most people think they're just decoration, but understanding these numbers is the difference between thriving plants and disappointment. NPK stands for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Nitrogen makes leaves green, phosphorus helps roots and flowers, potassium strengthens plants overall. Simple, right? But people use the same fertilizer for everything, and that's the problem. Let me tell you about my salsify disaster. Salsify is this old-school root vegetable that tastes like oysters when cooked. It's called the oyster plant for a reason. I was using high nitrogen fertilizer because I'd been growing lettuce in that bed earlier. Lettuce loves nitrogen for leaf growth. My salsify grew massive bushy tops, beautiful green foliage everywhere. But at harvest, the roots were tiny, skinny, and forked. Useless. All that nitrogen pushed energy into leaves instead of root development. The fix? Match your fertilizer to what your plant needs. Leafy greens like lettuce, high nitrogen, root vegetables like salsify or carrots. Higher phosphorus and potassium like 5 to 10 to 10. Fruiting plants like tomatoes, balanced NPK or slightly higher phosphorus. I switched to lower nitrogen fertilizer and added bone meal before planting. Next season, my salsify roots were long, straight, thick, and had perfect oyster flavor. Huge difference. Budget tip: make your own amendments. Bone meal for phosphorus, kelp meal for potassium, blood meal for nitrogen. Buy in bulk and customize for what you're growing. I spent $40 3 years ago and still have half left. Mistake. Number 3, timing your fertilizer like you're guessing. Mistake number 3 is all about timing, and this one trips up even experienced gardeners. People fertilize whenever they remember, or whenever the bottle says to, without thinking about what the plant actually needs at that moment. Plants go through different growth stages, and each stage needs different nutrients. Fertilizing at the wrong time is like eating a massive breakfast right before bed. Your body doesn't need that energy then, and it just goes to waste or causes problems. I made this mistake with celeriac. That's celery root, this knobby, ugly root vegetable that makes the most incredible soups and purees. It's got this intense celery flavor, but way more depth. I was so excited to grow it because store-bought celeriac costs a fortune. I fertilized heavily right when I transplanted the seedlings, thinking I'd give them a strong start. 2 months later, my celeriac had tons of leafy growth, but the roots stayed small and underdeveloped. I couldn't figure it out until I learned that a celeriac needs very light feeding early on, then heavier feeding once the root starts bulking up in late summer. The fix? Learn your plant's growth cycle. In the early season, most plants need gentle feeding to establish roots. Mid-season, they need more nutrients for vegetative growth. Late season, fruiting plants need phosphorus and potassium, while root crops need consistent but moderate feeding. For celeriac specifically, I now give them weak compost tea every 3 weeks early on, then switch to a balanced organic fertilizer once the roots start swelling in August. Last season, I harvested celeriac roots the size of softballs. Absolutely incredible roasted with olive oil and thyme. Here's a simple timing guide that works for most vegetables. At planting, mix compost into your soil, and that's it. 4 weeks after planting, start light feeding every 2 to 3 weeks. Once plants start flowering or roots start sizing up, increase feeding slightly. Stop feeding about 3 weeks before harvest so plants can focus on flavor development instead of growth. This timing approach has completely changed my garden. My vegetables taste better, store longer, and I'm not wasting fertilizer on growth stages that don't need it. Quick pause here, because we're about to get into the biggest fertilizer mistake I see, and it's costing people entire harvests. But first, if you're finding this helpful, smash that like button. It helps more gardeners find these tips. And seriously, drop a comment telling me which of these mistakes you've made. I've made all 7 at some point, so no judgment here. Also, stick around to the end because mistake number 7 involves something you probably have in your kitchen right now that's slowly poisoning your plants. All right, let's keep going. Mistake number 4. Overfeeding like more is always better. Mistake number 4 is the one that killed my neighbor's tomatoes, and it's probably the most common mistake out there. Overfeeding. People think more fertilizer equals bigger harvest, but that's like thinking if one vitamin is good, then it must be better. It doesn't work that way. When you overfeed, several things happen. First, you get tons of soft, weak growth that attracts pests and diseases. Second, you can burn plant roots, literally killing them. Third, you cause nutrient imbalances where too much of one thing blocks absorption of others. Fourth, excess nitrogen delays fruiting and flowering. I saw this with my romanesco. You know romanesco? That absolutely stunning vegetable that looks like a fractal lime green, cone-shaped, part of the broccoli family. It's not just beautiful, it's got this nutty, mild flavor that's way less bitter than regular broccoli. I was obsessed with growing perfect specimens. I started feeding them every week with a strong organic fertilizer, thinking I'd get massive heads. Instead, my romanesco plants grew into these huge leafy monsters with tiny loose heads that barely formed properly. The plants were so lush and green, I thought I was doing everything right. But come harvest time, total disappointment. What I didn't realize was that brassicas like romanesco need moderate, consistent feeding, not heavy doses. Too much nitrogen made them prioritize leaf production over head formation. Plus, all that soft growth attracted aphids and cabbage worms like crazy. The fix is simple, but requires patience. Follow the package directions, then cut that amount in half. Seriously, most fertilizer recommendations are too aggressive. Feed less frequently, but more consistently. For heavy feeders like romanesco or cauliflower, every 3 weeks is plenty. I also learned to watch my plants for signs they actually need fertilizer. Pale leaves and slow growth mean they need feeding. Dark green, lush growth means they're getting plenty. You don't need to guess or follow a rigid schedule. Let your plants tell you what they need. After I backed off the fertilizer, my romanesco improved dramatically. I fed them every 3 weeks with half-strength fish emulsion, and I got these gorgeous, tight, perfectly formed heads that were sweet and delicious. No pest problems either, because the growth was strong and healthy, not soft and weak. Here's the thing that really matters. Overfeeding doesn't just waste money and harm your plants. It also leaches into groundwater and causes environmental problems. Using less fertilizer is better for your garden, your wallet, and the planet. Mistake number 5, forgetting that water matters as much as fertilizer. Mistake number 5 is something almost nobody talks about, but it's critical. You can have the perfect fertilizer program, but if your watering is off, none of those nutrients are getting to your plants properly. Nutrients move through soil and water. If your soil is too dry, fertilizer just sits there doing nothing. If it's too wet, nutrients wash away before plants can use them. And here's the kicker. Inconsistent watering causes inconsistent nutrient uptake, which stresses plants way more than consistent underfeeding. I discovered this growing scorzonera. It's like salsify's cousin, a black-skinned root vegetable with white flesh inside that tastes incredible. It's been grown in Europe for centuries, but barely anyone in America knows about it. The roots can grow 2 feet long if conditions are right. I was fertilizing my scorzonera perfectly, using the right NPK ratio, timing it correctly, not overfeeding, but my roots kept being short and stubby with rough, cracked skin. I was so frustrated because I was doing everything by the book. Then I realized my watering was all over the place. Some days I'd water heavily, then I'd forget for 3 days, then I'd water again. This inconsistency meant nutrients were available, then unavailable, then available again. My scorzonera couldn't develop properly because it never knew what to expect. The fix changed everything. I started watering deeply twice a week on a set schedule, making sure the soil stayed evenly moist but never waterlogged. I used mulch to help retain moisture between waterings. Within a month, I could see the difference. The plants grew steadier and stronger. At harvest, my scorzonera roots were long, smooth, and beautifully formed. They stored for months in my root cellar and had this delicate, slightly sweet flavor that's hard to describe. Roasted with butter and herbs, they were absolutely incredible. Here's my watering rule for fertilizer success. Water deeply but less frequently rather than shallow and often. Deep watering encourages deep roots, which can access nutrients throughout the soil. Apply fertilizer when soil is already moist, never to dry soil. And always water after applying any dry fertilizer to help it dissolve and move into the root zone. If you're serious about getting fertilizer right, invest in a simple moisture meter. They cost like $10 and take all the guesswork out of watering. Your plants will thank you, and your fertilizer will actually do its job. Mistake. Narc 6. Ignoring your soil's pH level. Mistake number 6 is a sneaky one that makes people think their fertilizer isn't working, when actually their soil pH is blocking nutrient absorption. You can dump all the fertilizer you want, but if your pH is off, your plants literally cannot access those nutrients. Most vegetables like slightly acidic to neutral soil, around 6.0 to 7.0 pH. When pH gets too high or too low, certain nutrients become chemically locked in the soil. Iron, manganese, and phosphorus are especially affected by pH problems. I learned this lesson with cardoons. Cardoons are like artichoke's bigger, more dramatic cousin. They grow these huge silvery stalks that you blanch and eat like celery, but with this rich artichoke flavor. They're stunning in the garden, reaching 5 feet tall, and they're a delicacy in Mediterranean cooking. My cardoons look terrible. Yellow leaves with green veins, stunted growth, weak stalks. I was feeding them regularly with good organic fertilizer, but nothing helped. I thought maybe they had a disease or pest problem. Finally, I tested my soil pH. It was 7.8, way too alkaline for cardoons. At that pH, iron becomes unavailable to plants even if it's present in the soil. My cardoons had iron deficiency, not because the soil lacked iron, but because they couldn't access it. The fix took some time, but wasn't complicated. I amended the soil with sulfur to lower the pH gradually. I also added compost, which helps buffer pH and makes nutrients more available regardless of pH level. I mulched with pine needles, which are slightly acidic and help maintain lower pH over time. It took about 6 weeks for the pH to come down to 6.5 and another month for my cardoons to recover, but once they did, they exploded with growth. Beautiful silvery stalks, healthy green leaves, and incredible flavor at harvest. Here's what you need to do. Test your soil pH at least once a year. You can get a simple test kit for under $15, or many extension offices do testing for free or cheap. If your pH is off, don't just dump fertilizer hoping it'll help. Fix the pH first, then fertilize. For acidic soil, add lime. For alkaline soil, add sulfur. Both are cheap and effective. And always add lots of compost. because it helps moderate pH swings and makes nutrients more available across a wider pH range. Since I started monitoring pH and keeping it in the right range, I've had fewer nutrient deficiency problems and my fertilizer works way more effectively. It's one of those simple things that makes a massive difference. Mistake. Number 7. Using fresh manure or uncomposted materials. Alright, mistake number 7 is the one that can absolutely destroy your garden if you're not careful. Using fresh manure or uncomposted organic materials as fertilizer. I see people do this all the time thinking they're being smart and thrifty, but it causes serious problems. Fresh manure is way too hot. It's full of ammonia and salts that burn plant roots on contact. It also contains pathogens, weed seeds, and sometimes herbicide residues that can harm your plants. Uncomposted materials like fresh grass clippings or kitchen scraps rob nitrogen from your soil as they break down, causing temporary deficiency. My biggest disaster with this was growing Hamburg parsley. It's this amazing dual-purpose plant where you eat both the leaves, like regular parsley, and the root, like a parsnip. The root has this intense parsley flavor with a hint of celery, and it's incredible in stews and soups. It's popular in Europe, but hard to find here, so growing your own is the only real option. I got a load of horse manure from a local stable, and I was so excited because it was free. I spread it fresh on my Hamburg parsley bed, thinking I was feeding my soil. 2 weeks later, my parsley seedlings were dead, just completely burned up. The ammonia from the fresh manure literally scorched them. I felt terrible. I'd killed an entire planting of this hard-to-find vegetable. But I learned a crucial lesson. Always compost manure before using it, and that means letting it sit for at least 6 months, ideally a year. The fix is patience. When you get fresh manure, pile it up and let it age. Turn it occasionally to help it break down evenly. After 6 months, it'll be dark, crumbly, and smell earthy instead of sharp. That's when it's safe to use. I started a manure composting area in the corner of my yard. I get free horse manure from that same stable, pile it up, and just let it sit. Each year I use the previous year's pile in my garden. It's completely transformed my soil quality, and I've never had another burn incident. For uncomposted materials like kitchen scraps, either compost them first or use them as mulch on top of soil, not mixed in. As they break down on the surface, they'll gradually feed your soil without causing nitrogen tie-up. Since I've been using properly aged manure, my Hamburg parsley grows like crazy. The roots get thick and long, the leaves are lush, and the flavor is incredible. I harvest the leaves all season for cooking, then dig the roots in fall for winter storage. It's become one of my favorite vegetables to grow. The lesson here is simple. Free or cheap inputs are only good if you use them correctly. Take the time to compost organic materials properly, and your garden will thank you with healthier plants and bigger harvests. All right, garden friend, those are the 7 fertilizer mistakes that ruin vegetable gardens. Let's do a quick recap. Don't treat your soil like fast food. Use organic fertilizers instead. Pay attention to NPK numbers and match them to your plants. Time your fertilizer applications with growth stages. Don't overfeed, less is usually more. Make sure your watering supports nutrient uptake. Check and adjust your soil pH, and always compost manure and organic materials before using them. If you fix even half of these mistakes, you're going to see massive improvements in your garden. Better growth, healthier plants, bigger harvests, and you'll save money by not wasting fertilizer on approaches that don't work. Now, I want to hear from you. Which mistake were you making? Drop a comment and let me know. And if you found this helpful, hit that like button and share this video with a gardening friend who needs it. Don't forget to subscribe to Serene Green Gardens for more practical, budget-friendly tips every week. We're building a community of gardeners who prove you don't need expensive products or fancy techniques to grow amazing food. I'll see you in the next video where we're talking about companion planting combinations that actually work, not the myths you see everywhere online. Until then, happy gardening, and remember, the best fertilizer is always knowledge. See you soon.